Hello, Programming 11. Hey, we're going to be taking a look at object-oriented programming today. What's this object-oriented programming? Well, it's a lot, but basically it comes down to creating new types of things that we want to program. So types right now we have are things like int and boolean and kind of numbers and things like that. But we'd like to create some more advanced types. And one of the reasons why is because when we made our brick breaker class, our bricks each had an X array and a Y array and an alive array. You had all these different arrays, and we didn't really care too much because it was just the bricks that were many things we wanted to keep track of. But what if we had all sorts of different things that we wanted to keep track of? In a Minecraft type of game, right? There's creepers and there's blocks and there's trees and there's all sorts of various things that are out there in the world that you need to keep track of. And if you have to have an X array for each type of thing that's separate from its Y array, it seems kind of clunky, and it is. So we're not going to do it that way. What instead we're going to do is we're going to create a class, and a class is going to combine the data that an object needs to keep track of with the things that it can do. That's really the big new idea here. So we're going to go ahead and make ourselves a class. We're going to make a class inside of a new sketch. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in void setup and void draw. And what I like to do is make a little star field simulation, all these stars that are kind of flittering down the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'll give it a size, size, whatever size you feel is appropriate. I'll do it like this. I'm going to put in FX2D just to make it a little bit better at rendering. I'm going to do rect mode center just so that these are drawn centered. And I'm going to say no stroke. No thank you strokes. And that should be a good place to start. And then, once I'm done here, I'm going to go to a new tab. Yeah. I'm going to call it star. And this is going to make class star. I'll put in the braces. So this is going to be sort of a blueprint for how to build stars. I can make star variables after I finish this. Excuse me. So I can make star variables. I can make star arrays. I can do all sorts of stuff with stars. I guarantee you in Minecraft there's a block class that defines what it means to be a block in that game. And any game you can think of with many things going along, I'm sure there's so many bullet classes and enemy classes and you name it. There are all sorts of different kind of classes out there to define things that you see repeated over and over again in games. So we're going to make a star class. So the first thing in the class you do is make the instance variables. They are the variables that make up the data that define what a star is, or whatever the object happens to be. So our class star is going to be a thing that's going to be on the screen. So it's going to have a position. So I'm going to put float x and y. It's going to have a speed, so I'll put in vx and vy. It's even going to have a size. So that means every time I make a star variable, it's going to have these instance variables contained inside of it. Another word for this is fields. Fields. So a star has an x field, a y field, a vx, a vy, and a size field. It's like we've sort of created a super variable in some ways, a type that contains many different numbers that are all sort of categorized and given names. And every star we make, by the way, is going to have a separate x and y. It'll have a separate speed, a separate size, so they can all be created differently. So that's what it's the first thing we do is make instance variables. The second thing we do is make a constructor. It's a special function. I'll put the word special actually. Special function that defines how a star is born, I guess. A star, or in this case a star, but an object of this class is born. So, what are the initial values? I'll put that in there. Basically, that's the main thing. I'm making it sound all dramatic with a star is born and stuff, but it's all about defines initial values for its fields. I'll write fields, but these are what I'm talking about. Oops, I typoed that. Okay, so what does a constructor look like? Well, it always has the same name as the class. It's basically a function, except you don't write void. So normally you write void for a function, but this one you don't. You write just star. So this matches this, and then it's otherwise just a function like normally would happen. Okay, so now I can define how a star begins. So I'm just going to randomize this star pretty much. X is going to be a random number between 0 and width. Y will be a random number between 0 and height. And I think it's not going to have any horizontal speed. I'll just make the stars go straight down. And I will make the speed that it travels always down. So it'll be sort of like between 1 and height. So that'd be too fast. 1 and 5. And I'm going to make its size equal to its speed, which is a little bit weird, but you'll see why in a little bit. So the reason why I'm doing that is that the slow-moving objects will be small, and the fast-moving objects will be big. And so when there's a whole bunch of them in there, it'll create the illusion of depth. Just like in the parallax animation, the closer things to the camera move faster. So by making them bigger, your brain will interpret that as being closer. Okay, so these are all the initial values for our star. So basically stars consist of these variables, and these are their initial values. So the last thing we're going to do is put in what are called behavior functions. These define what a star does and how it acts. So you can have many of these. I'm going to put in void show. This will be the sort of the drawing of it. And then void act. And this will be its movement and other things. You'll notice these functions are inside the class. So that's an important thing to know. Normally we don't do that. That's not something we've done before. So a class is special. It sort of contains all this data and these functions and connect them together. So I'm going to go ahead and make a show function. So it'll be a rectangle. I know stars aren't square, but our stars will be square. They'll be small enough that you won't really care. It won't be noticeable. So I guess I'll stick in a fill white. And then I guess it's going to be a square. That's going to be XY size. And then its action will just basically be moving down the screen. And then when it gets to the bottom of the screen, it'll come back to the top of the screen. So I will put in a y equals y plus vy. And if y is greater than like height plus size, then I will set it to y equals negative size, just to make it go back to the top of the screen, but be off the screen. Okay, so there we go. So there is my very first class that I've created. It's supposed to represent a star. Stars have these numbers. The numbers start out with these values, and these are things that a star can do. So that's that. But this is really not the star itself. If I go back here and run this, we don't see any stars. Nothing's really happening at all. This is really just a blueprint for creating stars. So when we make a star, it'll get this stuff. It'll start this way, and it will be able to do these things, but I first have to make a star. So I'm going to stop the video there, and you're going to come back in the next video and see how do you create stars. And I think that will be useful. Okay, thanks everybody.